Right, back on LinkedIn with Mike, buddy. Secret Service to Hollywood. You got to tell us this story. What helped? What hurt? How'd you make this transition to be at the top of a major industry brand?
It was kind of a lot of it right place, right time, right person in position. And I at the time was running special events for Secret Service, so national special security events, inaugurations, political conventions, summits, those kind of things were really what my wheelhouse was in. And so at the same time, really started considering kind of leaving the government and getting over to private sector. And fortunately had an old boss and mentor who was in LA, who was actually at one of the studios, and was kind of helping me look for things. And suddenly one day called and said, we have a need. We don't have a position, but we have a need in our company. And was this something you might be interested in? And that was at Warner Brothers Pictures. And Frank O'Donnell, who just recently retired as the head of global security there, said absolutely. And that's where it all kind of started. I took the leap in 2015, going from the government. Have been employed by the government my entire adult life, since I was 18 years old, and took my first step into a private sector job.
What convinced you to leave that cushy 1811 GS13 or you probably maybe even 14 job to go? I mean, you literally went to Hollywood, Burbank, close enough, but you literally took that big jump. That's a huge commitment.
I was in kind of a unique place. So I came to the Secret Service after over 15 years on the police department. So I suddenly went from I was the youngest sergeant in my police department to now being the oldest guy in my academy class at Secret Service. And so the clock was ticking for me. What I realized was that I needed to find a career that was going to sustain me for the next, probably 20 years. Being that at age 50, I decided it was a good time to become a father for the first time. So, I knew that I was going to have to keep working, and I was afraid that if I, did my 20, which would be at age 56, 57, that it'd be just a little more difficult for me to try to find something serious at that point. So that's what kind of what started me looking earlier than waiting out my full 20. I would have gladly stayed with the government. I was enjoying my job. I loved the Secret Service. Loved the people that I worked with, but I really needed to make a conscious decision about moving on to the next step that was going to be more longevity than what the government was going to be able to give me.
So you talk about a mentor. Was that a mentor because of your time in the Secret Service, or was that something that you developed just naturally?
I had several people that really kind of have helped me. Even towards the end of my government career, that were kind of giving me some ideas of where to go private sector wise, and giving me some tips and just kind of helping me through interview processes and things. And Frank was definitely, one of those people. I stayed in touch with him since he had retired in, I believe, 2000, I think, from the service. He recognized right away when I came to the Secret Service that I came with a great deal of experience and a great deal of age. And he said to me, you need to get to your protection assignment sooner than later. And that was kind of where he first started giving me good advice. And then when I started looking in the private sector, and he got wind of it and offered to help, he said, look, you're never going to get the job you want looking on the internet. You're going to get it through your network. Right. And he made that possible by being in my network and being the first person that basically, took stock in me and offered me a position.
Yeah, I think there's a power in brand as well. Having the Secret Service brand behind you and having Secret Service alumni around you is that's a detractor too. Because not only do they know you, but they know what you've been through, what the training is, what your experience is, and if they maybe they didn't know you as well, they could make phone calls and they can ask around and say, hey, Mike's a good guy, right? We should hire him and bring him onto the team. Do you find that that's also power of the network?
Oh, absolutely. That's 4 years ago when I moved from Warner Brothers to NBC Universal, that's exactly how I ended up at NBC Universal, was through a network of Secret Service agents. And our chief security officer at NBC Universal is a former agent as well, and he kind of knows what you're buying with that. I've known him for 20 years. He knew what my capabilities were, and so that kind of helps a long way. It definitely helps that transition of you kind of know what's expected of you, because with someone in his position, I know what his expectations were in the Secret Service, and I try to maintain those same kind of high expectations in the current position. So there is a lot to that, but there's also a whole lot to diversification. When I was at Warner Brothers, another great mentor to me became Rick Wormack, who is now the head of global security there. And Rick came from NCIS and was a great person to work with and to kind of show me the ropes of the private sector and how he transitioned. So there was a great little mechanism there and a pretty small team. And the same thing now at NBC and in our West Coast team. We have myself, we have LAPD, Beverly Hills, Culver City, a number of agencies, the Sheriff's Department, a number of the agencies from around the Los Angeles metro area represented in our team, and everybody brings something so different and so different kind of experience that we really think we're pretty diverse as far as our think. There's not a lot of group think going on.
Oh, that's good. I was going to ask about that. As a hiring manager, you're bringing in all these people with law enforcement experience. What is it that you look for from them? What do you want to see on their resume? What do you want to see in their presentation when they come and you meet them for the first time?
For my team or for other parts of our company when we're hiring, it's particularly if you're coming from a public sector position, whether it's a municipal agency or a federal law enforcement agency. Something that I feel is really important is, what is your public sector interaction? Do you know how to interact with not just the public, but these corporations? They all have, are you able to adapt to their cultures? Because they all have their own culture. And, how are you going to fit in with that culture coming from the, culture you came from? Or did you spend a lot of your time in your law enforcement career interacting with those type of things, community groups, city councils, activist groups, whatever it is? Are you able to adapt to that and kind of, I hate to say become kind of a customer service model, but become kind of a customer service model? Because really in the private sector, at least in our, in a corporate setting, that's what you're doing, is you're providing a service to business units in your company. You're not making any money for them. Unless you are in the security industry, myself, I'm not making any money for my company. I'm costing them money, at all the times. But, what you really have to realize is what your hope is that you are saving them in the long run. You're saving, you're protecting your brand, you're protecting your talent, you're protecting your employees, your property, whatever. So, it's a long range that you'll never see what you provide, probably.
Yeah, great point. And I think that's understanding that value and understanding the culture and providing what I like to say is high touch service, high touch white glove, concierge type service. Not that that's foreign to a lot of law enforcement folks, but it's a harder concept for them to grasp because law enforcement service is relatively black and white, whereas security can have some gray areas to it. Like you can do certain things that you wouldn't do in law enforcement. And do you find that that folks coming out of, and particularly with like city or municipal law enforcement, do you think they have the right skills and they're learning those things, or they're at least adaptive to those things?
They're absolutely adaptive to those things. Particularly today is how adaptive policing is to a lot of different things, whether it's new assignments or whether it's new responsibilities that are granted to them or whatever. You can be very adaptive to that. And the biggest thing, for people particularly coming out of a response type, whether it's a municipal law enforcement agency or you're going to get those calls at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning, but it may not be the same kind of what you would say life-threatening situation that you dealt with in your previous career. But you've got to be adaptive enough to give it the same kind of attention. Occasionally it will be. Occasionally you will have something that happens, particularly in my area where I handle productions that are global. Occasionally we'll have something in another part of the world or even domestically that is a life or death type of thing. Not long ago, had a situation with a shooting situation near one of our productions in one of our cities, and that happens. Unfortunately, it's happening a lot more than recently. So what used to be kind of could be viewed upon from someone who was a little more, I guess, jaded as far as what's life or death have now become real life or death. So
Yeah,
bringing
no,
that
absolutely.
experience, and what that also carries over is when people tend to think that the sky is falling. You've been in a situation where the sky really is falling, or people are shooting at you, or whatever. It's easy to maintain a level of calmness and kind of bring everybody to your level of, look, this is a problem. We'll work the problem, and we'll get to a solution.
This is the exact situation conversation I had with Scott Fike, which is great to reiterate. Scott and I were talking about this very thing, and Scott was mentioning how when you're in the patrol car, you're managing, a shooting and a vehicle accident, and all these other things are going on, and you have to maintain calm, and you have to be that authoritative person in that situation. And I agree with you. I think that's the value that our law enforcement partners bring. And what I've seen is that there's a lot of folks who have been established and are a long time in the security industry that don't have that experience. And I think companies and corporations and businesses that face these types of risks really need people who can be kind of that calm person under pressure. The world is only getting more dangerous. So
Absolutely, and there is a transition, and it is real, and it is a different type of work, and that's what people transitioning to realize is that it's not just that you're changing out from going from a government organization to a private sector and it'll be fine.
right.
I happen to work with two gentlemen. One is my boss, the other is my peer who handles our on property things. Both of them could have been candidates to be chiefs of police at any of the major agencies around, anyone, and would have been great chiefs. But I said, you could have gone and been a chief standing on your head. But if you want to be challenged, take a step into the private sector, because there's where you're going to be challenged.
Yeah. You don't have the badge, you don't have the gun, you don't have air support, you don't have all these things. You got to do it on your own. Yeah.
And
Well, great.
they're both great. They're both doing fantastic at what they do.
And there's a little bit more safer environment than in law enforcement too. So there's that.
That's
But the career trajectory is there, and I think that's where we'll go next. So we'll hold here. So what I'll tell people at home: connect with both Mike and I. Comment below. Share this with your partners. Most importantly, don't go it alone. You're not alone. There's all kinds of folks out there that are willing to help you in your transition. Reach out to them. And Mike, when we get back, we'll talk more about that, and we'll talk about certifications and education and all this kind of other stuff. How do you be successful? That's what we want to hear from you, Mike, because you're doing it, and we really appreciate you being here. So hang on a second.